Well, good evening. Here I am, Arthur Kelly, your online instructor for English 120 Introduction to Literature. Been enjoying, as always, your conversations and your work that you've been submitting. Looking forward to what comes next as we move into the last 2 weeks of this course. I want to start out today with some direction and guidance because we're making a little bit of a change of pace as we move from more the direct study of literary works, specific examples of literary works, which you will still be engaged in, but the focus for this week is directed toward literary theory and criticism. Literary theory is the branch of scholarship that thinks and theorizes about the purpose of literature, the ends of literature, the relationship between literature and society or culture, or it assumes that such a relationship exists and wants to figure out what that relationship is and how it works. And remember the chicken and egg thing that has been my theme through this whole course. The ends of literature, the way literature is or the way it should be structured. And often does this by bringing the perspective of other disciplines to bear on the study of literature. So this course has, as you know, considered the relationship between culture and literature, the relationship between the two, both as what it should be and what it is. As you will see, others study literature from a psychological perspective generally, or more specifically, from a particular theory of psychology, such as Freudian or Jungian psychology. They can help us understand what is going on in literature in general or a specific work in particular, especially in the workings of the characters in the story or even the psychology of the author and how it is manifest in the story. Which leads us to another field of literary theory, and that's the biographical. The study of biography engages literature by considering artistic output as a reflection or expression of the psychological struggles or realities or makeup of a particular artist. Feminist literature studies or addresses the study of literature and how literature represents or misrepresents or objectifies women in particular times and places, and does cultural analysis of periods of literature in terms of women and women authors and so on and so forth. In other studies, the feminist critic might consider the works of one woman author and bring her work and the stature of this artist to greater understanding and to a wider readership. It is enough for you to understand this, that critical theorists are concerned about what literature ought to be or what it should do, with how it works, not necessarily really focusing in on specific application and analysis of a particular work. Although they do that, their purpose is for a larger, bigger picture. Now, literary criticism is essentially the critical application and analysis of those theories to the particular work or a particular author. So, for example, Jungian theory says that there are deep patterns in human consciousness. Jungian psychology says there are these deep patterns in human consciousness and that these are common to all human beings. Although they may be expressed with serious cultural or ethnic distinction, Jung calls these patterns archetypes. That's the theory. A Jungian critic will read and study literature to identify and unpack those archetypes in a particular work and unlock the deeper psychological meanings of a singular work. So Jung and Northrop Frye present us with the archetype of the hero, for example. The archetype of the hero is a pattern that says the protagonist will actually proceed through certain steps in order to achieve freedom or victory or insight or wisdom. The Jungian critic looks at particular works and says, here is that pattern. Here's how it works in this work. Here are the steps of the pattern as seen in this work. And here is the outcome or understanding, the insight, the wisdom the protagonist gains. This week, I only expect you to get the bigger picture of the relationship between theory, critique, and application. I don't expect you to fully understand this often challenging subject. This is an introduction to literature course. But I do want you to understand that storytelling, narrative, has a long and ancient history. That poetry, song singing, has a very long and ancient history. And literary theorists help us to understand what that is and how it works and why that is. Literary theorists help us to understand how the mystery of literature works. How is it that some literature surpasses time, space, history, and ethnicities and cultures, and continues to speak powerfully and meaningfully to persons of all cultures and ethnicities and in all the languages of the world? How is it, for example, that Hamlet, my favorite Shakespearean play, is still performed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in nearly every culture, every country, every language in the world, even though it is firmly grounded, written in the Elizabethan age and what that culture meant then and there, written in the English language and addresses questions and concerns that are distinctively Western and human. The reading assignment, which says, read chapter 12 of the Norton Introduction to Literature, Critical Approaches to A Rose for Emily, on pages 736 to 759, is to give you some insight into how this process works. You don't need to read all of that. You don't need to read all of those critics. But please scan through and read 2 or 3 to give yourself a sense of how this story, which you've read, A Rose for Emily, has been understood and critiqued over the years from different perspectives. You'll discover, I believe, I did, that some of your own critical appraisal of this short story actually fits into significant critical theory by major literary critics and theorists. Good for you. I want to say one final word about the essay assignment, which asks you to do something called an explication. Your essay for this week asks you to explicate a poem or a short story, so I think it would be helpful if you had some understanding of what you're being asked to do. I had a professor in graduate school who talked about this and said that you have to split the lark to find the music. That's what explication is. That's digging into the poem or the short story or the novel or the play and figuring out the bits and pieces and how they connect and how they relate and so on and so forth. Digging around in there, mucking around in there, trying to find out what it makes sense. It is necessary on some important level to tear that poem or that short story or that novel or that drama apart in order to find out how it ticks. But my professor also added that if you can't put the lark back together, all you have is a dead bird. So an explication means, as you'll read in some materials that I'm posting for you, to unfold, to fold out, or to make clear the meaning of. It is a finely detailed, very specific examination of a short poem or short selected passage, prose, or any kind of literary work from a longer work in order to find the focus or design of the work, either in its entirety in the case of the shorter poem, or in the case of the selected passage, the meaning of the microcosm containing or signaling the meaning of the macrocosm, the longer work of which it is a part. I've posted 2 items on Moodle in week 4 that will help you with this assignment. One is titled Explicating a Poem, and obviously if you choose to work on a poem, that is the one you want to look at. The other is simply titled Explication, which is applicable to either poetry or prose. So you might want to look at both of those and make your decision on that basis. Remember now, this is an introductory course. You're not expected to master this work, but I do want you to do some serious thinking about a particular literary work and do some equally serious critical reading to determine how it works. Both of these pieces ask you to do more than you need to do, or even can do in the time and space that we have. So choose carefully and focus narrowly. So far, as we move into week 4, you're still doing really good and thoughtful work. I've enjoyed the class. I've enjoyed your discussion, although I think it's gotten a little quieter this week, but that's okay. It's still good stuff. I'm looking forward to these last 2 weeks and the quality work that you have proven you can do. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Don't hesitate. I look forward to the conversation. Blessings on our journey.